Welcome to the stories from the urban. On that ominous night, the whole neighborhood echoed with screams. Normally, childbirth at a bathhouse is considered ill-omened, but that night they haven't any choice. When the woman's water broke, it was 2 months early, and her husband was with the homeowner's hunting party. The lady of the house wanted to give her a car, but the midwife told them it was already too late because the baby's head already started to appear and the nearest hospital was hours away. So it was decided the most suitable place for childbirth was the bathhouse. Although everybody likes the djinn stories, nobody still believed that kinda of story would come true. They were stories for little scare and entertainment. You could feel the pains in the scream, and that was normal. But the cold breeze in the bathhouse wasn't normal for that kind of hot summer. Though nobody noticed that because of the urgency of the situation. Then suddenly silence fell down. The moment mother began to worry. A cry raised by the baby, everybody was relieved by the cry. But in a brief moment, midwife's eyes caught a shadowy figure, and she felt the cold. But she didn't say a word at the moment because the baby was premature and she didn't want to make the mother more uncomfortable than she was. When her father finally returned from the hunting and heard the story about birth taking place in the bathhouse, he gave her the name Perihan for precaution. On her 18th birthday, she already had many suitors. However, she didn't seem to interest any of them, like she didn't interest in people in general. She was good with needlework and carpet weaving. Also, she was good with hunting. She escaped from the house and followed her father and his hunting company. Her absence was never felt in the household these days, and her father's hunting party never realized her presence until she made her move to kill the prey. Her sneaky nature never hides her beauty, but she always prefers animals to human connection. The house owner's son was sent to abroad school when he was 4. That was the year Perihan was born. His mother died in childbirth, and the lady of the house who tried to help Perihan's mother was his second wife. Although Perihan's parents were grateful to her, she never understood her husband's disapprobation. When the boy returns to home, surprisingly he befriended Perihan very quickly. He told her story of his birth, at last his father's version of it because he couldn't remember naturally. At that point, she understands his father's disapprobation of his new bride's actions because he also came to earth in the old bathhouse. Although his parents wanted a lot of children, they only had one, which was not from lack of trying, but doctors said his mother was infertile. They loved each other very much, so they never thought about divorce. Sometime later, his mother started to see terrible nightmares, but his father always comforted her gently. While these terrible nightmares took place, a miracle happened, and she became pregnant with him, and the nightmares ended. His birth was difficult and premature like Perihan's, but the only difference was his mother couldn't survive childbirth. His father believed there was some entity in the bathhouse while he was born, and he suspected maybe this creature was his father too, but he gave his bride a promise, which was to raise the child as good as possible and find him a good mother. He kept his promise. He was a lonely child like Perihan, so his father's solution to this was sending him to the best schools. But these kind of schools were always boarding schools. His father and his stepmother visited him very often though. They were always proud of his success, but always heartbroken by his loneliness. That was the day they decided to marry each other, and both of their parents were happy to hear this decision. In the end, their children weren't lonely anymore. Before their first anniversary, Perihan got pregnant. Everybody was so happy, but her father-in-law was very cautious as soon as he got the news. He made sure a car always was ready to go to the hospital and stopped to go hunting parties too. Everybody thought he got a little bit off, but no one could tell him because he was the owner of the house. His son confronted him about this, but his father was determined and convinced him too. Actually, he was always getting a strange feeling from that bathhouse too. In his point of view, the bathhouse was ill-omened for childbirth, and he would make sure this baby wouldn't be born in this bathhouse. Months passed like this. When Perihan's father was on a hunting trip, a storm broke off. The roads to the house were closed by falling trees, and Perihan's father's party couldn't return before the storm ceased. The owner of the house got stressed, although the baby's delivery was still had 1 month. He went to check the car. The windows were shattered from hail rain, but if there was an emergency, car could take the road. He sent a man to check the hospital road, and his fears came true. The road to the hospital was closed down too, because of fallen trees. While he was returning home, he passed by the bathhouse, and he thought he heard a laughing sound come from there. When he came back home, Household realized he was panicking and tried to calm him down until Perihan's constructions began to start. He was losing it completely now, and they had no choice but to restrain him. They gave him herbs disguised as tea and put him to sleep. He was awakened by Perihan's screams. When he passed out, it was evening, but now it was nearly dawn. Although he knew screams were coming from the bathhouse, he searched the whole house before going to the bathhouse. He woke into the bathhouse screaming, "Why? Why did you come here for childbirth?" They tried to explain to him that was for hygiene reasons, but he didn't even listen to them. His eyes caught upon his boy, and even of all people, "How did you let this happen?" he asked. I didn't want my wife and my child to get any infections," he said softly. But his eyes had fear in them and fixated on the wall before Perihan after he talked to his father. He didn't catch on this cause he was still shouting, "Why?" with fury. His shots cut with Perihan's scream of pain, and the midwife furiously shouted, "Get him out now!" Perihan's scream of pain mixed with his struggles to stay inside, but eventually they took him out. The owner of the house rushed into the house. While all this took place, Perihan's husband still motionlessly stared at the wall. The midwife went to the husband's side and whispered to him, "There is a complication. From now on, you should pick child or wife." The husband slowly turned his head to the midwife and stared blankly. She repeated, "Wife or child, you must choose swiftly." He mumbled something first, then a sharp shot came from him. My wife! I don't want that thing to kill my wife!" Everybody thought he was talking about the child, but he was looking directly into the shadowy figure. Perihan called her husband to her side. She was whispering with pain now. "I want my boy to live," she said. I know it's a boy. I want you to protect him from that thing, and name my boy Korkut, for he will be feared by that thing's kind. That was Perihan's last words. Before the husband realized what was happening, midwife pushed him and started the procedures for saving the child. At that moment, two shots were heard from the outside, and the owner of the house rushed inside. "No!" he shouted. "Step back from her! This child shouldn't be born!" He swiftly aimed his gun at the midwife and took a shot before thinking. That moment, he didn't realize his son jumped in front of his gun. A thin voice rose from his son. He said, "Don't, I made a promise to her," and fell to the ground. The child's cry mixed with the house owner's cry. Midwife whispered in the child's ear, "Your name is Korkut." While the house owner was crying, saying, "No, I didn't mean to." Suddenly, he heard a laughing voice and realized the child's cry and fired two shots towards the midwife, then one into his head. When the hunting party heard two shots from the house, they accelerated their efforts to remove the collapsed tree. When they finally closer to the house, they heard the last three shots. They rushed to the house and found two dead men in front of the bathhouse. Perihan's father understood the situation, but he didn't want to believe it at first. When he rushed into the bathhouse and found corpses, he suddenly fell onto the floor and began to cry. Others who came to the scene tried to console him, and they called law enforcement. According to Perihan's father and the scenery, childbirth should take place in the bathhouse, but there was no child in the scene, nor a stillborn. The child who was born on that day was never found, but his grandparents never lost hope until they died. From that day to this day, the house is still abandoned, but people who live nearby believe djinns live there now, and no one wants to even approach it, let alone buy it. Thank you for listening to my story. If you like the story, please press the like button and share it with your friends and share with your family. I don't know. Just share it and press the like button. Love ya. See ya in the other stories soon, I guess. Bye.